You already read people more than you realize. You notice when a person smiles too quickly, when their laugh comes a second too late, when their voice changes after a simple question, when they say, "I'm fine," but their body seems to disagree. The problem is not that you see nothing. The problem is that you were trained to ignore what you see. You were taught to trust words first, to accept the performance, to believe the polite version of the person standing in front of you.
Nietzsche would have called that naive, not because words are useless, but because words are rarely innocent. People do not always speak from truth. They speak from fear, pride, shame, instinct, resentment, guilt, desire, vanity, and the need to survive socially. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche suggested that psychology should once again become the queen of the sciences, because for him, the deepest truths about morality, religion, power, and identity were not found only in ideas. They were hidden in motives. They were hidden in drives. They were hidden in the strange gap between what a person says and what a person is.
This video is not about becoming paranoid. It is not about turning people into puzzles so you can manipulate them. It is about learning to see clearly. Nietzsche was one of the great masters of suspicion. He looked at noble words and asked what instinct was hiding underneath them. He looked at morality and asked whether it came from strength or resentment. He looked at confidence and asked whether it was power or compensation. He looked at kindness and asked whether it was generosity or fear.
And that is where reading people begins.
The personality you meet is rarely the whole person. It is often an arrangement, a defense, a mask. Nietzsche wrote that every profound spirit needs a mask. That sentence alone can change the way you see everyone around you. The mask is not always fake. Sometimes it is the only way a person learned to survive. The first psychological truth is this: everyone wears a mask to survive. A kind person may truly be kind, but excessive kindness can also be fear wearing beautiful clothes. It may be fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear that love will disappear the moment they become inconvenient. A strong person may truly be strong, but visible strength can also be a wall built around humiliation. The funny person may be joyful, but humor can also be the safest way to confess pain without admitting it. The moral person may be sincere, but morality can also become a weapon that lets someone feel superior without calling it superiority. So do not only ask what a person is showing you, ask what the performance protects. A mask always has a function. It protects someone from shame, abandonment, insignificance, helplessness, exposure, or the terror of being ordinary. Carl Jung later called this kind of social face the persona, the version of ourselves shaped by what society rewards, punishes, admires, and rejects. Nietzsche reached the same territory through philosophy. He saw that what people call my personality is often the history of what they had to become in order not to be destroyed.
The second truth is that what someone hates in others often reveals what they cannot face in themselves. This is where we have to be precise. Projection is a term that belongs more directly to Freud and later psychoanalysis, and Jung gave us the idea of the shadow, the rejected part of the personality that the conscious ego refuses to identify with. But Nietzsche prepared the ground for this suspicion. He understood that judgment is rarely pure. When someone repeatedly attacks the same quality in others, their criticism may be doing hidden psychological work.
The man who mocks weakness may be terrified of his own vulnerability. The woman who constantly attacks vanity may secretly live under the tyranny of comparison. The person who sees corruption everywhere may be fleeing from their own compromised motives. The one who cannot stop denouncing arrogance may be obsessed with status, but too ashamed to admit it. This does not mean every criticism is projection. Sometimes criticism is accurate. But when the criticism is obsessive, emotional, repetitive, and strangely personal, it is no longer only about the target. It is about the speaker.
Nietzsche's concept of ressentiment is essential here. In On the Genealogy of Morals, he describes resentment not merely as anger, but as a creative psychological force. When a person cannot openly become what they admire, they may condemn it. If they cannot be powerful, they may call power evil. If they cannot be beautiful, they may call beauty shallow. If they cannot be free, they may call freedom selfish. Envy often disguises itself as moral clarity. Resentment often calls itself justice. That is why criticism can become a confession. Sometimes I hate people like that secretly means I hate that I cannot allow myself to be like that.
The third truth is that silence reveals more than words. Nietzsche distrusted easy language because language simplifies the chaos of drives, instincts, feelings, and motives. In The Gay Science, he writes that thoughts are the shadows of feelings, always darker, emptier, and simpler. That line matters because it reverses the ordinary way we understand people. We think the explanation comes first and the emotion follows. Nietzsche often suggests the opposite. Underneath the clean sentence, there is a more complicated emotional reality. The spoken explanation is only the shadow on the wall.
So when someone pauses before answering, the pause may be more honest than the answer. When someone avoids a certain name, changes the subject too quickly, laughs at the wrong moment, or becomes strangely formal after a personal question, the body is speaking before the story can catch up. A person may tell you they are over something, but their voice becomes flat whenever it appears. They may say they are not jealous, but become cruel toward the person they claim not to envy. They may insist they are not afraid, while their entire life is organized around control. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche gives the body a deeper wisdom than conscious thought.
Whether you take that poetically or psychologically, the lesson is clear. The body often knows what the ego is still denying. The fourth truth is that excessive virtue can become disguised vanity. Nietzsche was not against discipline, generosity, courage, or nobility. What he attacked was moral theater, the transformation of goodness into a stage where the ego can admire itself. Be careful with the person who constantly announces their purity, the person who always needs to be publicly on the side of the good, the person who corrects others, not to clarify truth, but to enjoy elevation. Nietzsche's critique of morality is not the childish claim that all morality is fake. It is much sharper. He asks what a moral judgment is doing for the person who makes it. Does it express strength, or does it compensate for weakness? Does it protect life, or does it punish life? Does it come from abundance, or from resentment?
Real goodness does not always need an audience. Real integrity can act quietly. But moral vanity needs a stage. It turns every conversation into a courtroom and every disagreement into proof of someone else's corruption. Some people do not use morality to become better. They use it to feel untouchable. The louder the purity, the more carefully you should watch the hidden pleasure underneath it. A person may not want to be good. They may want to be above accusation.
The fifth truth is that people do not lie to you first. They lie to themselves first. Many lies are not invented in the moment. They are rehearsed internally for years. I don't care. I'm over it. I'm happy for them. I forgive them. I'm not jealous. These sentences are often not direct attacks on you. They are self-protective stories the person needs in order to keep functioning. In Human, All Too Human, Nietzsche writes that convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. A lie still knows truth exists. A conviction may forget it is defending itself.
This is why contradiction matters. When someone's story does not add up, do not immediately assume they are plotting against you. Sometimes they are trapped inside a lie that began as emotional survival. Their explanation was not built to describe reality. It was built to protect an identity. A person may deny their envy because it threatens their pride. They may deny their guilt because admitting it would force change. They may deny their pain because pain would destroy the role they have been performing. Look at the places where the story repeats too often, where the emotion is too strong, where the answer sounds rehearsed. That is where the hidden truth pushes through.
The sixth truth is that where someone feels superior, they are often hiding inferiority. Alfred Adler later made this pattern central to his psychology. Feelings of inferiority can produce compensations, fantasies of greatness, and a desperate hunger for significance. Nietzsche did not use Adler's clinical language, but he saw the same human movement. The person who constantly needs to dominate may not be strong. The person who constantly compares may not be confident. The person who casually humiliates others may be trying to silence their own fear of being small.
Real confidence does not need to announce itself every few minutes. It does not need every conversation to become a contest. False superiority is different. It is restless. It needs witnesses. It needs someone beneath it. When someone cannot stop reminding you of their intelligence, their status, their achievements, their moral purity, or their importance, ask why their self-image requires so much maintenance. Behind the crown, there may be a frightened child begging not to be insignificant.
The seventh truth is that most actions are driven by unconscious fear. Nietzsche was suspicious of the comfortable idea that people consciously understand why they act. In Twilight of the Idols, especially in The Four Great Errors, he attacks our habit of confusing causes and effects, and he questions the belief that conscious will is the simple origin of behavior. A person may say they are just being realistic, while the deeper motive is fear of disappointment. They may say they value independence, while the deeper motive is fear of dependence. They may say they hate drama, while the deeper motive is terror of intimacy, because intimacy always carries the possibility of conflict. If you want to understand someone, do not only ask what they want, ask what they are afraid of losing. The controlling person may fear chaos. The jealous person may fear replacement. The agreeable person may fear abandonment. The detached person may fear need. The workaholic may fear stillness. The cynic may fear hope, because hope once humiliated them. People rarely build an entire personality around desire alone. Very often, they build it around danger. The eighth truth is that excessive criticism is often a confession. Freud gives us the vocabulary of defense mechanisms. Jung gives us the shadow. Nietzsche gives us the suspicion that many judgments are symptoms of the judge. When a person constantly criticizes the same thing, you are not only hearing an opinion, you are hearing an internal conflict that has found an external target. The man who attacks emotional people may have been punished for emotion. The woman who belittles other women's appearance may be in a private war with her own reflection. The person who mocks ambition may have failed to protect their own ambition. The person who calls everyone fake may not know how to be real without feeling unsafe. Criticism becomes most revealing when it is disproportionate. A small criticism may be reasonable. A repeated obsession is diagnostic. Trace the attack back to the attacker and ask what part of themselves they are trying to exile. The ninth truth is that false confidence often hides guilt. There is a type of person who always seems certain, always composed, always ready to lecture, always prepared to win. At first, this can look impressive. But if you watch long enough, you may see how fragile it is. Their jaw tightens when they are questioned. Their voice becomes sharp when they are corrected. They cannot apologize without turning the apology into self-defense. They cannot admit uncertainty because uncertainty feels like humiliation. This is not peace. It is armor.
In On the Genealogy of Morals, Nietzsche's discussion of bad conscience is useful here because he treats guilt not as a simple moral fact, but as something that can turn inward and reshape the soul. Guilt that cannot be faced directly often returns as rigidity, superiority, punishment, or theatrical certainty. A person at peace can usually say, "I was wrong." A person at war with themselves must keep winning. So when someone seems too confident, do not be intimidated too quickly. Ask what kind of insecurity needs that much armor. The 10th truth is that exaggeration betrays the hidden truth. When someone says, "I never care what people think," they often care very deeply. When someone says, "I'm always happy," they may be terrified of sadness. When someone says, "I don't need anyone," they may have learned that needing someone is dangerous. Exaggeration is not just style, it is volume. And when the ego turns up the volume, it is often trying to drown something out. Nietzsche did not trust claims that were too clean, too absolute, too final. Human life is mixed. Drives conflict, feelings contradict each other. Desire and shame often live in the same room. So when someone describes themselves in extremes, listen for the denied opposite. "I'm completely over it" may hide obsession. "I never get jealous" may hide jealousy. "I'm not angry" may hide anger that has learned to smile. The more absolute the claim, the more carefully you should ask what it protects. The 11th truth is that the desire for control often masks inner chaos. Some people organize the outside world because the inside world feels unlivable. They control schedules, conversations, relationships, money, image, tone, timing, and even the emotions of the people around them. They call it discipline, standards, responsibility, or leadership. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is fear. Nietzsche's idea of the will to power is often misunderstood as a crude desire to dominate others. A better reading is that life seeks expansion, expression, mastery, and the discharge of strength. But when this drive is distorted by fear, it can become obsessive control. The controlling person is often less powerful than they appear. If they were truly inwardly ordered, they would not need to police every movement around them. Their strictness may be an attempt to prevent collapse. Their intolerance of change may reveal how little trust they have in themselves. When someone must control everything, do not only see power, see the person who believes that if they let go for 1 second, everything will fall apart. The 12th truth is that the louder the performance, the emptier the core may feel. This truth has become even more visible in the age of social media. The curated identity, the constant display of happiness, the public moral posture, the need to be seen at all times. All of this can look like confidence, but often it is hunger. Alexander Nahamas, in Nietzsche, Life is Literature, reads Nietzsche as a thinker of self-creation, style, and the construction of a life almost as if it were a work of art. But there is a difference between creating a self and merely performing an image. The first is art. The second is dependence. A person who genuinely knows who they are does not need every stranger to confirm it. But the person who does not feel real without an audience must keep producing evidence of existence. "Look at me" can mean "I am powerful," but it can also mean "please do not let me disappear." The louder the performance, the more carefully you should listen for the emptiness beneath it. Sometimes a person is not showing off because they love themselves. Sometimes they are showing off because they cannot feel themselves without reflection.
The 13th truth is that people rarely speak from pure logic. They speak from pain, instinct, and interpretation. This does not mean facts do not matter. It means people usually arrive at their beliefs through a history of wounds, desires, loyalties, humiliations, and fears, and only later build logical arguments around them. Nietzsche's perspectivism is important here. He does not imagine a human being standing outside life, outside drives, outside the body, speaking from nowhere. Every belief has a history. Every philosophy has a bloodstream.
So when someone says love is fake, they may not be presenting a philosophy of love. They may be protecting a betrayal. When someone says people can't be trusted, they may not be giving a theory of human nature. They may be describing the shape of an old wound. When someone says success is meaningless, they may be defending themselves against the shame of wanting it. If you want to understand someone's worldview, do not only ask what they believe. Ask what experience made that belief necessary. Ask what pain that belief prevents them from feeling again.
The 14th truth is that how someone reacts to weakness reveals their real power. Do not judge a person only by how they treat the strong, the attractive, the useful, or the people they want something from. Watch how they behave when compassion is possible, but not required. Nietzsche is often caricatured as a philosopher of cruelty, but his deeper concern is more complicated. He despised weakness when it turned itself into resentment, but he also despised pettiness, cowardice, herd cruelty, and moral revenge. The question is not simply who can dominate. The question is who has mastered themselves enough not to need cheap domination. If someone mocks vulnerability, they may be afraid of their own. If someone punishes mistakes with pleasure, they may have been raised in a world where mistakes were unforgivable. If someone sees every weak person as disgusting, they may be trying to destroy the weak part of themselves. Real strength has restraint. It can see pain without immediately using it. It can hold power without turning it into humiliation. If you want to read someone, watch them when they have the chance to be cruel, and no one would punish them for it. What they do in that moment tells you more than their public principles. The 15th truth is that the person who fears being forgotten will chase attention. This is not always vanity. Sometimes it is panic. The child who was unseen often becomes the adult who cannot stop performing. The person who was ignored may learn to become dramatic. The person who felt replaceable may become addicted to being memorable. The person who was never listened to may speak in ways that make silence impossible.
Adler is useful here because he emphasized the human need to belong and to feel significant. If a person feels they have no secure place in the world, attention becomes a substitute for love. They may dress loudly, speak loudly, provoke, exaggerate, seduce, interrupt, shock, or create conflict simply to feel that they exist in the eyes of others. At first, this looks like ego, but sometimes it is grief. Sometimes attention is not the celebration of the self. It is the emergency signal of a self that fears erasure. The 16th truth is that the person someone attacks is often the person they envy. This is one of Nietzsche's sharpest insights because resentment does not merely hate what hurts it. It creates a moral interpretation in which the unreachable becomes evil. If I cannot be powerful, I call power corrupt. If I cannot be beautiful, I call beauty shallow. If I cannot be free, I call freedom selfish. If I cannot create, I call creators arrogant. This is one of the most dangerous human habits because it lets envy feel righteous. When someone repeatedly attacks a person who has something they secretly desire, do not only listen to the insult, listen to the longing hidden inside it. The person who mocks confidence
may want confidence. The person who despises successful people may want success. The person who gossips about someone's freedom may be trapped in a life they do not know how to leave. Envy is unspoken desire mixed with shame. It says, I want that, but I do not believe I am allowed to want it, and I do not believe I can have it. If you can see envy in others, you become less wounded by their attacks. If you can see envy in yourself, you become freer.
The 17th truth is that people act out their childhood more than their declared beliefs. This is not a direct Nietzschean doctrine in the modern developmental psychology sense, so it should be framed carefully. Nietzsche gives us suspicion toward conscious explanations. Freud, Jung, and Adler later give psychology a larger vocabulary for childhood, repression, defense, persona, shadow, inferiority, and compensation. But the practical insight is clear. People often repeat roles before they understand them.
A person who was never heard may become someone who never listens, because interruption became their model of power. A person who was punished for emotion may become cold, detached, and proud of being rational, because rationality became the only safe identity. A person who had to earn love may become addicted to usefulness, achievement, or desirability, because simply existing never felt like enough. A person raised around chaos may either recreate chaos or become obsessed with order. They think they are acting from principles, but often they are reenacting old survival strategies. To read someone deeply, do not only ask who they are, ask who they had to become.
The 18th truth is that patterns are confessions, if you know how to listen. People may not tell you what hurt them, but they will repeat it. The person who disappears when intimacy appears is confessing fear of closeness. The person who overworks until exhaustion is confessing fear of stillness. The person who flirts with everyone but connects with no one is confessing fear of being known. The person who creates conflict whenever peace arrives is confessing that peace feels unfamiliar, maybe even dangerous. Behavior is not random. It is memory in motion.
Nietzsche wanted philosophy to become more honest about the forces underneath civilized speech. He did not want us to worship explanations simply because they sound noble. He wanted us to ask what kind of life produces this belief? What kind of wound needs this morality? What kind of weakness hides inside this condemnation? What kind of strength hides inside this silence? Reading people is not a trick. It is a discipline of attention.
And now comes the most uncomfortable part. These 18 truths are not only about other people, they are about you. The masks you notice in others may resemble your own. The traits you hate may point toward rejected pieces of yourself. The people you envy may be carrying parts of life you secretly want. The criticism you repeat may reveal where you are still wounded. The attention you chase, the control you demand, the certainty you perform, the silence you hide inside, the moral judgments you enjoy too much, all of it is material for self-knowledge.
Nietzsche is dangerous because he does not let you remain innocent in your own eyes. He turns the gaze back on the observer. If you learn to read people only to feel superior, you have learned nothing. You have simply built a more sophisticated mask. But if you learn to read people in order to stop being fooled, to stop reacting blindly, and to see the wounded human being behind the performance, then the skill becomes something deeper. It becomes clarity.
The final lesson is not trust no one. That is too simple. The final lesson is this: trust patterns more than performances, reactions more than slogans, tension more than polished identity, and repeated behavior more than beautiful explanations. Words matter, but they are not enough. A person's real philosophy is not what they announce. It is what they repeat under pressure. So the next time someone speaks, listen. But do not listen only to the sentence. Listen to the fear beneath it. Listen to the wound behind the certainty. Listen to the envy behind the insult. Listen to the shame behind the arrogance. Listen to the silence after the joke. Listen to the body when the mouth says, "I'm fine."
Because people are always telling the truth, just not always in words. And the person who learns to hear that truth becomes harder to deceive, harder to control, and harder to break. Not because he sees everyone as fake, but because he finally understands what Nietzsche saw so clearly. Human beings are deep, divided, masked, wounded, proud, frightened, and unfinished.
To read others is to look behind the mask. To read yourself is to ask why you needed one.